I'm back and I'm sewing, and today I'm sharing with you this top has a really cool knot with an ingenious way of putting it together. So super fun. Stay tuned. Hi sewing friends, I'm Karina. This is Lifting Pins and Needles, a channel all about sewing, limitless sewing, and I'm glad to be back. From now on, everything on the channel is going to be a bit more regular, like you've been used to before the trip I took for almost 2 months back home. Life is settled, sort of. My son's back in school and I am all into the sewing. And I was gutted while I was back home in Chile to miss a test from Itch to Stitch. I saw the testing core, the pictures, everything. And at the time, I was at my in-laws' house where there is no way to sew. I can't sew there. So I was like, oh no. And this pattern was released on Sunday. So as soon as I saw the release and everyone posting their pictures, I liked it even more. And I went ahead and got the pattern. So this pattern is called the Sabalito top. I'm not sure what it stands for. It sounds like a Spanish type name because of the ito end of it. I don't know, but that's what it's called, and it's a really cool top. This top has 3/4 length dolman sleeves with a deep V. At the center front, there's a knot tied twice from what I can see, a top bodice and a bottom bodice. It's a relaxed fit. And I love that it's made for woven fabrics. Usually patterns made for wovens really catch my eyes more than the ones made for knits for some reason. Maybe it's because my stash is maybe 90% wovens and I have a lot of wovens at my disposal that I really want to make. The fabrics recommended are stable, light to medium weight wovens like linen, chambray, double gauze, rayon, challis. I've never actually worked with double gauze before. I would love to see how it feels. I've never come across that fabric as of yet. When I saw this design, I immediately knew what fabric I had in my stash that would suit this design, and I went and grabbed it, draped it all over my body, and said, yeah. I thought I would try a lighter weight woven. I went for a crepe that is sort of sheer, but not that much. I wouldn't say I can't wear it without something underneath. I can. But it's not the heaviest of crepes. It's not a chiffon either. So I would say it's a lightweight crepe. The patterns from this company come from sizes 00 to 20 US. All the woven patterns from Itch to Stitch have cup sizes also. So there's A, B, C, D, and double D cups separately. And looking at the body measurements and the finished garment measurements for my size, choosing the C cup that I always saw with Itch to Stitch, I noticed that there was about 5 to 6 inches of ease at the bust, about 7 or 8 at the waist, and about 3 at the hip. Now this top is not long. It reaches sort of the mid-high hip area depending on how tall you are or if you're going to make length adjustments, so it's not hitting the full hip. Considering that my body is in a size 14, I decided to size down to a size 12 to have a little bit less ease. Personally, I tend to prefer less ease sometimes in these types of garments. So instead of making a straight size 14, I made a size 12, but blending to a 14 at the hips because I do need the space there. I didn't think I needed all that ease here on the upper body, you know. The chart there has really detailed measurements, and I like that it has the length of it. So from the nape of your neck down, it's 57.5 centimeters. That's about 22 3/4 inch. And that is a really good length for me. I like my tops at that length. I put the tape measure, looked in the mirror and thought, yeah, I like that total length. I don't want to do length adjustments to this pattern. Other patterns I do length adjustments. I am taller than the 5'6" these patterns are drafted for. I'm 5'8". So I usually add about an inch or an inch and a half somewhere around the pattern, depends on the design, the area. For this one, I decided that was fine. I looked at all the pattern pieces, and every pattern piece is cut in a single layer due to the width that the dolman sleeve takes up. And so it can be quite fabric hungry. For my size, it required 2 meters. And I usually do not have 2 meters of anything. It's not an amount that I buy. Most of my cuts of fabric are a meter 20, a meter 30, maybe a meter and a half, pushing it. So I decided from the get-go that I wasn't going to do the 3/4 length sleeves. I was going to fold them away and just make shorter dolman sleeves. And that's it. I would be able to get my pattern pieces not cut in a single layer. I could actually place them on the fabric normally. and get my pattern with less fabric. Now if we see the line art here, you can see the features and that there is a center back seam on the top bodice, not on the bottom bit that goes at the back. I inverted that because of my fabric issues. So you will see later on that I do have a seam at the center back on the bottom bodice, not on the top. That one I didn't put a seam there, I cut on the fold. Anyway, I was very intrigued at how this was going to come together just by looking at it. I'm like, how does that work? Where does that knot come from? How? Like, I had a lot of questions, and I went reading the instructions, and it was just so amazing to sew up. The construction, super ingenious. The way it was designed is just brilliant, and I really liked doing something different that I'd never done before. I'd never done this type of knot thing where you're gonna see. Anyway, I'm going to show you in up close and so personal the way I like to interface. Ooh, the birds are back, you know. In up close and so personal, you're going to see how I like to interface certain areas of garments, and it's a way I've been doing it for a long time now, and I'm going to show you that. It's called block fusing. Also how I'm going to put everything together, specific marks that need to match, and specifically I'm focusing on how this neckline was constructed and how it's going to turn out really nice. So let's hop into all the practical sewing that I love sharing with you now.
Don't you think this is starting to wear on me? You've been rated down like hell. I'm weak.
These are the facing pieces for the top, and I'm working with crepe that sort of slides. It's not the most stable fabric. I'd rather just fuse a larger piece of interfacing onto the fabric and then cut the facing, so I don't have to do it twice and risk the shape, you know, stretching out and getting out of shape. I really want to protect this facing so that the top turns out looking nice. So I've done the same over there. It has a grain line mark going slanted, so that line is in relation to that one over there, and I've fused a piece of interfacing there. So I can just cut these out, mark the notches, and then carry on. These are the pattern pieces. Those are the two fronts there, one on top of each other. That is the back. Now originally the back had a center seam. It had minimal shaping around there, around the waist area, very minimal. But I really didn't want to have a seam cut into those squares. I just couldn't, like, it wasn't going to look very nice. So I just straightened out that seam and folded back the seam allowance and just cut it on the fold, making sure that is the same amount as the original one, so it matches the bottom piece that goes under there. There's also one there for the front. This one's cut on the fold, but there's going to be some maneuver here to get the tie. I'm still not sure how this is constructed. I'm intrigued. There are the facing pieces that have already been interfaced, and I've got them pinned there, just ready to be sewn together. So I'm just going to put the shoulders up on the top together and get sewing. Now if you realize, I've cut the sleeve shorter. So the sleeve was a dolman sleeve that would come down to there. I made it 7.5 inches shorter just to match my weather. I don't think I would get a lot of use out of a top with that long sleeve, so I just cut it shorter. In this area here where the tie starts, there are lots of little marks there, 2 dots, another one there, and that's to match the ones here on the facing. So this area here is gonna take some precise sewing. I'm gonna be stay stitching this neckline there on the front, and that before I do anything else, so I can protect those areas. This fabric is the one that will want to stretch and get out of shape. I've sewn the shoulder seams there. This is the right side of the fabric, and I've pressed the shoulder seams towards the back. The facings are on top, right sides together, and those seams match the shoulder seams there. And I have hand basted this on so it doesn't wiggle. This fabric is really shifty, and I don't really trust pins to keep them right in place. There's notches to help align the facing to the neckline, so that one matches there on both sides. Another little dot there. Down here there's another one, matches there, the neckline. And towards the bottom there's a dot there and a dot there where you pivot. It goes up this way, And I actually drew what I have to sew with a chalk. So it's all done with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. So that goes there to that dot pivot, to that dot pivot, and then down. And that's where that seam finishes. And then this needs to be clipped right there. So that happens on both sides. There's the other side, go up there to that dot, dot, there, and then snip. So because I've hand basted it and everything's nice and secure, I'm just going to do this as a continuous stitch. I'm going to start there, go there, pivot up, around, there, there. Before sewing the facing onto the neckline, the edge of the facing needed to be finished prior, whatever method you like. I'm just serging, and it was really clear in the instructions that if you were serging, try not to trim any of the width away. So I was really careful to be right on the edge so I didn't lose the width there. I have to start there, pivot, 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 lots of pivoting here. So I'm not going to be rushing this area here. The dot to pivot again, and the seam is going to go all up the neckline. And here's the other side that also has the seam lines drawn, so it's easier. And right there on the dot, pivot again. This is one of the ties. I have trimmed the seam allowance to half so it's less bulky. And that has been snipped. And so this just needs to be turned right sides out, this little tie area. And that little point there, I'll just help myself along with the scissors, being really careful. There. So that's turned. And all those little areas where there was all that pivoting done, here is where that little seam is. And you can see that shape that this is able to do because of that snip that was done to that little corner inside. So what I'm going to do before I press this, because this fabric is hard to press properly, you know, you might get folds here on the seams. I like to do that really accurately. So what I've done already on the other tie is baste this. So you can see this area here that needs to be really sharp. I've just gone and carefully made the seam be really nice and precise there, and then I've just hand basted that, ensured the point is nice and neat, and I just did that up to where the tie starts. So up above all the rest of the neckline, the facing needs to be understitched. So the seam allowance needs to be pulled towards the facing. This is the facing here. And then that understitching there that will keep the facing inside, you know. So I'm just going to finish basting the other side so I can press it, and then I'll be understitching the facing. I'm going to do the understitch with this presser foot. I move the needle to the left and the facing is towards the left. The seam allowance is towards the left under there, and I'll just be sewing all around the neckline. This is the seam there of the facing that meets the shoulder seam right there, and this part of the neckline at the back is very curved, as you can see. So under there, when I trimmed the seam allowance, I also snipped a lot. I've been pressing this facing towards the wrong side, so that's the interface bit touching the wrong side. And this is the little part here where the bottom of the front is going to go right there. So it's super neat, ready to catch on that seam that's going to go right there. And I've removed the basting stitch. I've already pressed this nice and neat. And I'm just going to continue pressing all along. This is starting to look like something. The facing has been pressed, everything understitched. You can see the facing reaches up to there and there. And now before I top stitch the facing down, I have hand basted it because I really want it to be really neat, and I know it's going to shift with the pins. So I just have to do that seam there all around. The side seams are still dangling there. Look how sheer this is. But this is the light I use above the sewing machine so that you can see what I'm doing. I'm going to be sewing from the inside so I can see the edge there of the facing. You can see the serged edge, and I'm going to use the 1/4 inch foot to guide the edge there. I won't be sewing the facing right on the edge, 1/4 inch in. This is where the facing goes curved at the back, so I'm just going to take it slow. The side seams of the top bodice have been sewn underneath the arm there on both sides, and here in the center I've pulled the ties up like that, and that little bit that had been done prior, really clean finish there, those two are butted together, and to keep them together I did some hand basting there just to keep them together there and them not move around. This edge has to be serged, and at the bottom here are the 2 bottom pieces for the top, sewn there on the side seams, and they've also been serged there. Now there were notches there to match everything up, and I made sure to be careful when I was serging not to lose those marks. I do have a sneaky center back seam on the bottom piece at the back because it was the only way I could get the top out of the fabric I had, but it's not going to be noticeable because I managed sort of to match the shapes there. These need to be put together on the round. On the left side, the wearer's left, there are 2 dots there that you can see. So that area in between doesn't need to be sewn because that's where the tie is going to go through later. So I'm going to start on 1 dot, go around and finish on the other dot there. This is the top bodice, and in there I've got the shorter one that goes on the bottom. They're right sides together, all the notches are matched, and this is the center area where I had basted that so it stays nicely butted together. This is the left side, because that's the center here. You're seeing it on the right side of the screen, but when you turn it right sides out, it'll be on the left. So on the pattern, there were 2 triangle marks. I just marked them as dots, and I'm going to start sewing there, go all the way around, and then finish there, and that little area is going to be left open. Here I'm about to sew across this middle bit that's been tacked together, so be really careful to sew right there and not catch part of these little ties that are here. They need to be left free. Okay, and there is where I have to stop sewing where that other pin is. So there's like maybe about 1 inch of an opening there. That's where that hand basting was. I removed it. That's the ties right there, and now this is the seam that unites the top bodice to the bottom bodice, and here is the opening right there. So I'm going to put a pin on each side, and now with a straight stitch I'm going to sew this around, making like a little rectangle, and that's to make sure that little opening is secure. So I'll just sew around there. side, you can see that little rectangle I just stitched to keep that opening safe and secure there. That's why these seams had to be serged separately, because these two are going to be separate, you know. And from the right side, it looks really neat. There, little opening for one of the ties to go through. I've turned it right sides up and I've pressed that seam that unites the top to the bottom bodice, and the side seams, everything's nice and pressed. So this is the left side. Okay, so the right tie goes from the back, from the inside, it comes out through this opening. A little bit fiddly, I would say. So when it goes through there, you need to adjust it so that that's nice and straight there, the neckline. And then this will make this crossover, the left over the right, and then a knot there. There, knot. And it says there to do 2 knots, but I'm gonna try it on and fiddle with it. Otherwise the top is done. All I need to do is hem the bottom and the sleeves. Here is my top. I've chosen this crepe with these little designs. I'm not sure what to call them. Those little, it's like plaid but in little squares, and I think this is the closest you ever see me wear any type of plaid design, because I'm not a fan, but because it's black and it's got the little tiny bits, I think it's really cool. I love black, red and white. I think this can go a long way in my wardrobe. And I really like the shorter dolman sleeves. You saw that I've shortened them by 7.5 inches or 19 centimeters. And when you see it on, you're gonna see it's still quite long. I mean, it's not short for me at all. And I was concerned about the curve here underneath, you know, that this was going to be too way down and that you were going to be able to see my bra from the side, but it's not the case. You can't see anything at all. The basta that you can see here, maybe I had to lower it by 1 inch, but that is a common adjustment that I will make with 99.9% of patterns. You saw that there was lots of hand basting, and it's because I wanted the facing to lie as neatly as possible. I really can't think of a way to do it without all that hand basting, and especially with this type of fabric. I think if you chose a more stable fabric like linen or chambray, I think it might be easier to manipulate this area, and I think you could get away with just using pins and stuff. But you know that I love to hand baste on the best of days. I don't mind. It's relaxing and I love seeing the results. This is the back, and the original design has a center back seam with a little bit of shaping here around the waist area, very slight, and I couldn't match up the plaids the way I wanted it to. I thought it was just going to ruin my top just because of the print. If I'd had another print or a solid, I would have totally done the seam, you know. I don't have issues with doing seams. But just because of this, I didn't want to interrupt that. I left that on the fold, as you saw. And at the bottom here, on the bottom bodice, there is a seam. And because it was a smaller pattern piece, I was able to match these plaids so that they look like it's all continuous and you can't really see that seam. I had no other way of placing the fabric. I mean, it was that or that, you know. Now, this overlap. The pattern does mention as a feature that it's a deep V. Okay, so you can wear this on top of things, and I want to have my options open. All I did there was put a pin. I couldn't find a safety pin like right now when I'm filming this, but I would usually put a safety pin because I want to be able to wear it with something underneath. In that case, I would just let it loose and just let it hang how it wants to and be a really deep V. And if I'm wearing it on its own, I would just put a safety pin. So I didn't tack that down or put a snap or anything permanent like that. Maybe you can see where one of the ties goes into that little opening right there, and that is what I really wanted to show you how it was done, because it did have I did scratch my head for like 2 minutes. I have to be honest. I'm usually okay with instructions, and specifically for this area of the garment, I was actually following them because I really didn't understand what was going to happen. It's not a type of garment that I've constructed before. So I had to read it 2 times to understand what was going on. But once I understood, it was really easy. And I did change a few things. You know, there are some changes in the way I sewed it compared to the pattern, but not sort of in this area. So that's okay. I didn't understand why the top and the bottom had to be serged separately. I was like, why? Until I got to that point, I'm like, that's why. So it was a really fun project to make. I had a lot of fun making it. My grass is a jungle and I don't want to step on it because there might be any types of creepy crawlies there. So I'm just gonna have to switch this. I don't know if you're gonna see because the light is a bit strange. Okay, you can see this is the fit that I achieved, a little bit more fitted than what you see in the product pictures because that's how I prefer. I think it defines my shape a little bit better, and you can see that the dolman sleeves I've made shorter are really not that short at all, and I don't feel exposed if I lift my arms that people are going to see anything through there at all. It's completely fine. So if you wanted to make a shorter sleeve version, you totally could. There is the little tie. I love that. How it fits at the back. I like that length. Up closer you can see where I like this neckline with the pin. That's how I would wear it if I was wearing it on its own like I am right now.
Don't you think this is starting to wear on me? You've been raining down like hail. I'm weak.
I really liked sewing this. It just challenged me in all the right levels. This pattern was released on Sunday. I think it's still on sale. It's release sale. If you like this pattern and you would like to give it a go, you can purchase it through my link down below in the description box. I receive a small commission from that sale, and that doesn't cost you any extra, but it does support me, what I do here on the channel. I have been sewing a lot and I will have another video for you tomorrow. Hopefully from the next week on, we'll be back to the 2 to 3 times a week videos. So I hope to see you soon. Happy sewing. Bye.